Hello and welcome to another edition of the CGD podcast with me, Rajesh Merchandani. Here at the Centre, we have been hosting our annual Sabbat lecture in memory of Richard Sabbat, a dear departed friend of the Centre. And this year we've had the honour of having Anne-Marie Slaughter as our speaker. She's the President and CEO of the New America Foundation, and her lecture was entitled Horizons and Boundaries: What Technology Can Do for Development and What It Cannot. In a moment, we'll speak to Anne-Marie, but first of all, let's revisit a little bit of her lecture.
More is not better. I learned some new terms for this lecture. I didn't know what an exabyte was, and I didn't know what a petabyte was, but there was a prediction that the amount of digital data at the global level grew from 150 exabytes in 2005 to 1,200 exabytes in 2010, and there's a projection that it will keep growing at 40% a year. So, a petabyte is the equivalent, think hard here, 20 million four-door filing cabinets full of paper. So I'm thinking about my garage, which has 10 filing cabinets full of paper that no one's ever going to look into again. And I'm trying to imagine 20 million of those. And that is 1 petabyte. And an exabyte is 1,000 of those. It's useless, right? That much data is useless. You might as well have none. Right, so it's really going to, more is not better, less is better, and a lot of the work that we're going to all be doing is the filtering, is the reducing, is the figuring out what people really need to do. In fact, I was thinking that looking for a needle in a haystack is now really, we should say, looking for a byte in a data archive.
Anne-Marie Slaughter, great to have you here on the CGD podcast. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
You described yourself as a techno-optimist, not a techno-utopian. And you say when it comes to technology, more is not better. What do you mean by that?
Well, more, when I was talking about more is not better, I was talking specifically about information and the just unimaginable quantities of information that we are producing. Data about our behavior, data, our own speech, right? So that now 6 billion people in the world can, in theory, broadcast their every move and put it on various social media platforms, as well as more official data. And so the human mind really can't comprehend how much data is out there. And even if you just think about how can you follow Twitter and Facebook and Tumblr and Medium? No, your capacity for absorption is finite. So more is not better, meaning for all this explosion of knowledge and information, the real work is the filtering, the managing, the searching, the interoperability of different systems so that we can tame all that data.
This is called the paradox of plenty, isn't
yes,
it? The idea
yes,
that
exactly.
we have so much information, but what's actually, what we don't have is the attention span,
yes.
or the ability to filter it. But in terms of technology's role in development, though, there are hard and fast examples that we see every day. Just the other day I was reading about solar power batteries in people's homes
yes.
as a non-prohibitively expensive
yes.
A reality. And then also we're seeing the use of technology, mapping technology,
right.
In helping to find people in the aftermath of that awful tragedy in Nepal. So see, these are some of the kind of the horizons of your talk.
Yes, yes. So on the good side, the idea that we can now actually locate human beings after disasters, before extreme weather events, in that they can locate each other. That's extraordinary. That's like a Columbus moment in the world, where we went from a notion that the world was flat, obviously Galileo, to a world that was round, and you could sail around it, and you could map it, and you could identify where people were. Now that map that we all carry around in our heads of where we are, and we imagine where other people are, we can actually make that representation. So there's no question that that's enormous progress. I think also the simple availability of the world's knowledge and education to those many enormously talented individuals who had no opportunity is undeniable progress.
So this is things like MOOCs. We've talked about the ability to kind of map, if you like, or track corruption, pollution, deforestation,
Exactly.
animals to safeguard them, people ourselves. These are all positive aspects of technology and development. But isn't the real issue, the real limit to how technology can be used in development is policy, isn't it? The technology can do everything it likes, but without the policy behind it, without the right policies in place, it's almost useless.
Well, I would say the policy and the human willingness to enforce that policy. So absolutely, I mean, you can drop technology all over the place. What will happen is that the cleverest, the greediest, and probably in many ways some of the most criminal are likely to use it. I mean, the technology itself can be used for good or ill. The ways in which we insist that any technology, take an automobile or a plane or a book for that matter, is used for good, is policy, is government coming together and saying, here are the permitted areas you can use this thing, and here are the forbidden areas. But equally importantly, there has to be the willingness then to engage people around the actual enforcement of that policy. And that requires trust, it requires civil society, it requires a basic social contract. Technology can help, but it can't actually get us there.
And as a scholar of the intersection between international law and international rights and cooperation, you've written a lot about this. But what's really missing, and especially thinking of this year and the big development moments we have, is that global cooperation, isn't it? Or do you feel optimistic that that global cooperation will actually happen when it comes to agreeing the SDGs, how to pay for the SDGs and the Paris Climate Accords?
So I think that the age of big global accords is receding. I'm not saying we won't have any others, but effectively once we got past a certain number of nations and then a certain number of superpowers, to a world of almost 200 nations where anybody can be a spoiler, I think the kinds of big global accords we're going to get are going to be pretty vague. On the other hand, I do think there's a lot of possibility for regional cooperation. So in many ways, what you once might have expected out of the UN, you might expect out of the African Union or the Organization of West African States or South African States. So I do think there's much more possibility there that states can come together and help each other. And I also think there's a huge value in informal cooperation, networks of government officials who are coming together, who are trying to create a greater economic opportunity or to reduce poaching or deforestation or increase energy resources. So they're informal ways that will achieve, I think, what once required a treaty or a formal agreement to achieve.
Do you feel optimistic about the big moments ahead of us this year on that kind of informal agreement, actually achieving something concrete on the SDGs, on financing for development?
Yeah, so on the SDGs, I think the MDGs were very important, but they weren't important because they were enforced. They were important because we did come together and set a goal. What that really did was to empower energetic, well-intentioned government officials and civil society and even corporations to have a benchmark or to have an aspiration and to say, look, this has been legitimized, we should do it. So we effectively gave people a powerful chip on their side in domestic political bargaining, and I think the SDGs will do the same. Development finance, that's going to be very interesting. If we achieve something big, it's going to be because the private sector is contributing in a way it never has before. It will not just be government finance. It will have to be the large asset managers agreeing that they have a stake in a more stable and prosperous and well-governed world, and they're willing to make money available.
You talked about a stable, prosperous and well-governed world. When you were at the State Department,
yes.
Amongst the long list of accomplishments, you inaugurated the first quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review, the QDDR. The second one has just come out, and it puts development at the heart of foreign policy. Hooray, we would say here
Yes,
at CGD,
yes.
about time. Great that it's there. What's your reaction to the second one? Do you know much about what's in it, and what do you think it's achieved?
Well, the thing I'm most thrilled about is that there is a second one. It's hard to have a quadrennial review if it's only one. So now it's happened twice after 4 years, and every time that happens, we can assume that there will be one 4 years later, because it is not legislated. The one for the Defense Department is actually legislated that they have to do it every 4 years. This is voluntary, but so I'm thrilled there is a second one. I'm delighted that they are focusing on development. I'm delighted that they're focusing on partnerships beyond government. That was something we focused on a lot. They are also talking about knowledge management and big data and competitions to improve the State Department's ability to do that. So from what I know, I'm very, very pleased with the result. It's less grand in some ways, but that makes sense, because it is the second and it's building on the first, and it's very focused on practical solutions.
Are you hopeful that a future administration, whatever colour that may be, will maintain the QDDR now that it's had a second outing?
I am. And the reason I think it will is that it's a great opportunity for whoever the Secretary of State is to put his or her mark on the building, and and it concentrates the mind in terms of, well, what are my goals? And it isn't just up to the secretary, but I think any individual secretary would be a fool to give up that kind of a tool.
And symbolically, the fact that it's happened twice now, as you say,
Yes.
It means that there is a series of them. It's not a unique quadrennial TDR.
Indeed, and I'm grateful to Secretary Kerry for wanting to carry it forward.
How much of a symbol is that in terms of a shift in the US view of development as being a win-win for both the US and developing countries?
Yes.
How important is it that the next administration understands that?
Very. I mean, so what Secretary Clinton built on some of the work done by Secretary Rice, but Secretary Clinton came to power saying, I am going to elevate development. This is my goal above all. And I'm going to make the 3Ds, development, defense, and diplomacy, but in the civilian side, development and diplomacy. That attitude has to continue, that it's not charity. It's not a moral obligation. It is in the United States' self-interest to invest in countries' prosperity and health and literacy and security. And that needs to be understood as what I call realism with a longer time frame. Realism is all about power and interest. Well, having developed, prosperous, healthy, literate countries in the world is profoundly in the U.S. interest. It's just that it takes a decade or decades, and you have to invest for the long haul.
One of the things that a lot of the development events are focusing on this year, one of the things that Secretary Clinton focused on was empowering women and girls.
Yes.
Do you feel optimistic that has changed? And the reason I ask you is obviously 2012 you wrote a very controversial article. I wondered if your thoughts had changed on that.
Well, so my view was, the opportunities for women and girls in the United States have been revolutionized in my lifetime. So I'm a complete optimist here. It was unimaginable that we would have had a woman Secretary of State, much less 3, when I was growing up. And I was really just on the cusp. I'm the pioneer generation of women were 10 years ahead of me, but by the time I got to law school in the early 1980s, I'd never seen a female doctor or an engineer or a judge. So it's been huge. I think the opportunities for women are enormous. The global opportunities, this in many ways will be the century of finally unleashing all of human potential, not just male human potential. And I'm optimistic in the United States. I think in the United States and in developed countries, we need to focus less on women and more on care, more on the value of caring for others, whether that is done by women or men, because what's happened is we're all focused on breadwinning, and we're not focused on what it takes to actually care for each other, whether we're young or old or sick or temporarily disabled. In developing countries, it's still a matter of more basic rights, because really women still need to be recognized as fully equal human beings. So I'm optimistic, but I think they're different. We're at very different phases of the struggle.
So would you say that your thinking has kind of moved on from saying that women can't have it all?
So the title of the article was Why Women Still Can't Have It All. And the point, even though it was not widely understood as that, was to say, here are the changes we still need to make so that women can have the same opportunities men do.
And those changes you see.
And those changes are coming. That we still got a long way to go. And I think it's a society-wide change that needs to happen. You cannot expect any human being, man or woman, to go all out on their career and raise children and take care of parents all at the same time. It just can't happen. Men couldn't do it. Women can't do it. So if we're really going to get to equality, then we have to all take account of what it takes to invest in the next generation, to honor our elders, to care for each other, and to have great careers. And it's perfectly possible to do both, but not really at the same time all the time.